I'm from a rural area in central Alabama, about a 30-minute drive from the capital city of Montgomery, in a town known as Pine Level. This story took place in either the summer of 2002 or 2003. I can't quite remember if it was my cousin, who we'll call Jake, or myself, who had turned 13 that year. But these events are definitely narrowed down to one of those years. I lived with my parents and a younger brother, and Jake lived with his dad, his stepmom, his brother, who we'll call John, and his older stepbrother, who we'll call Ryan. Our two families lived in two separate houses located on my grandparents' farm, which was a 16-acre area surrounded by many acres of cow pastures which belonged to someone else. During the summer in question, I had my friend, who we can call Edward, staying the night at my house, which was the norm during the summer months. I don't recall all of the details, but I'm sure we had spent the evening doing our regular stuff, watching Dragon Ball Z or Lord of the Rings, and eating too much junk food. That night, we were playing in my backyard, which stretched out to one of the shoulder-high fences that separated our yard and the neighboring cow pasture. Our security light lit up the backyard and barely reached past the fence and into the cow field. And we were playing near the fence by a big tree that practically touched the fence. All of a sudden, we heard a commotion coming from the cow field. We both looked to see cows that were less than 10 yards away from us in an obvious state of panic. They were mooing and scattering in all directions. I'd like to add that we were previously not even aware of these cows being there because they were so still and quiet that they had become just part of the background. But when they got stirred up, it immediately commanded our attention. Why were they so panicked? It was not a common thing to see the cows spooked by anything. The answer to that question came almost as soon as we saw the cows scattering. Because in the middle of this cluster of bolting cattle was a figure in the dim light. The figure appeared white, or at least very light in color, was about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, the size of a child. The shape of its head made me believe at the time that it could have been hooded, and it appeared to be skipping. Not walking, not running. Skipping like a child in a circular pattern in the middle of the terrified cows that couldn't scatter quickly enough. The cows weren't the only ones who ran. Me and Edward ran to my back porch and inside my house and locked the door behind us. I don't remember the conversation we had in detail, but I know after we calmed down a bit, we confirmed that we had witnessed the same thing. I'll add here that there were no kids around that size who couldn't have been playing a prank. This was a pretty secluded area, and there's nobody around that would have dressed in white and silently appeared next to the cows to risk being trampled, all for a chance to spook us. Not to mention the way the thing was skipping, it just didn't look right. There was a certain carelessness and grace to the movements that I can't just imagine someone faking. It just showed up as if it wanted to be seen by us without actually acknowledging us. If the story ended there, I probably wouldn't be sharing it, but there's more. I mentioned my cousins, Jake and John, earlier. Well, at some point after Edward and I saw the pale figure, I went to tell my younger cousin John about it. John was an honest kid, even when it didn't benefit him to be. As I am telling him the story, he interrupts me and begins describing something similar that had just happened to him. He tells me that during Jake's recent birthday party, he, Jake, and a handful of Jake's friends were playing in my backyard on our trampoline. My family was out for dinner at the time, and my cousins knew that they were always welcome to walk over and play in our backyard. At some time before sunset, when everything was still visible, but daylight was starting to fade, one of the boys pointed out into the cow pasture and said, "What's that?" The boys all looked, and according to John, over 50 yards into the field, maybe closer to 100 yards, something moved from behind one cow and ran to another. It would be hiding behind a cow, and then dart to another cow to hide itself once again. The boys, trying to make sense of this, assumed it was my cousin's stepbrother Ryan playing a prank on them. At the time, they didn't grasp how improbable it would be for him to hide behind a cow without startling it and run to hide behind another, all for a prank. Their minds just tried to rationalize what was happening. That is, until this figure bolted from one cow to another that was many yards away, running at a speed that no person should be able to run. I was not there to witness this, but those boys were so frightened by this that they ran back to my Uncle S' house crying and pleading for him to let them inside. These were tough football playing boys, not wimpy kids that would risk crying and looking cowardly over nothing. For years I thought what John, Jake, and Jake's friends witnessed matched the exact same description of what Edward and I saw. However, recently I was corrected. John told me not long ago that what they saw in the pasture was dark in color, whereas what me and Edward saw was light colored, if not white. I am not sure if the distance at which they saw the figure made it appear to be a different color, or if they saw something else altogether. What I can say is the time frame between my encounter and their S was likely less than 2 weeks apart, maybe only a few days. It was in the same cow field, visible from my backyard. To me, having 2 encounters by 2 sets of people take away any doubts I could have about this being my young imagination running wild with me. It's not that I didn't believe in what Edward and I saw, but hearing a similar account from someone else who hadn't yet heard the details of my encounter just solidified the whole thing as fact to me. We moved from that area a few years later, and I've never seen anything else there. I occasionally drive past part of that old cow pasture, not too far from where we lived, and I always look out into the field, wondering if I might catch a glimpse of some hooded childlike figure skipping whimsically just beyond the reach of my car's headlight beams.